All right, this is the Real Trade Show, Real Trade Masterclass. I'm Jim Brown from New Path Title, James Brown Law, and our award-winning world-class technology Title Leap.
Awesome. I'm Ryan Poole. I'm the founder of Real Trade. It's real estate made social. It's online marketplace and social platform for real estate. Nice thing is free for agents. There's thousands of agents on there, thousands of buyers and sellers, and you can get free leads and sell properties quicker. So
today we're going to be talking about Senate Bill 4D. We've talked about it in general in the past. We're going to talk about it much more specifically with regard to what are the duties of the association, what are the personal liabilities of board members, what are the enforcement mechanisms, and then if you're a realtor, most importantly, and I don't know a better way to put it, how do you sell property in a condo today, knowing what you know without feeling dirty or running afoul of the disclosure rules or things like that. So we're going to set out this general framework that the whole thing operates within. And then at the very end, I'm going to try to bring it home and strike home for realtors. How do you go to your buyer? How do you go to your seller and not show them everything you know and shock them out of the transaction and what you need to disclose and what you can not disclose? Then we'll have a question and answer session. And if you turn on your cameras, it gives me the opportunity to see the feedback. So working a live room is wonderful. You can always see everybody's reaction. Zoom is great because it allows you to reach more people quicker and easier and more conveniently, but I do miss out on your reactions. And if I'm saying things that aren't resonating with people, as soon as you guys make your cameras live.
And they can put the questions too, if you have, as you're going, so you don't forget them, at the end, write the questions down in the chat, right? So we have an ongoing questions in the chat too, that we can address as well later on.
Yeah, we'll do question and answer. And then after question and answer, Ryan's going to show you how Real Trade can save you time and make you money as an agent. And then I'm going to show you some time-saving tools that you can use with Title Leap.
Awesome.
All right. Without further ado, we'll jump right into the topic. So I'm going to give you guys, this isn't the snooze portion of it, but I'm going to summarize the things that Ryan and I have talked about the last couple of years. So SB4D is a body of law in response to the Surfside condominium collapse, where an engineer gave a report calling out structural defects under the old paradigm, and the board failed to act in a manner, they actually acted contrary to the reports, because under the old paradigm, you could actually limit by vote of the members the amount of reserves and things like that. Subsequently, the building failed, 100 people died, hundreds of people were injured, and this was a serious issue. The legislature took it up early last year. They acted very quickly. Within a few months, they actually put something in writing. It has some problems, and we'll talk about those in a minute, but there's two basic elements to the reporting, and they're the milestone reporting. So I call that MSR, milestone reporting study. And then there's the SIRS, structural integrity reserve study. So you got this report on the structure, and then you got this report on the reserves that you have to keep. This applies to 3 stories or more, building condominiums that are 3 stories or more, 4 units or more. Ryan, I didn't realize that there was a minimum unit threshold. So it's actually only 4 units or more. So some of these small condominiums doesn't apply to. It applies to condos and co-ops, residential and commercial. And the way to think of this thing is there's 2 classes of condos. There's within 3 miles of the coastline and outside of 3 miles of the coastline. And I'm going to send you guys an outline. So don't feel like you got to take notes. When we're all done, I'm going to send you an outline. You'll have everything at your fingertips. Brian's over there writing away. And so you got 25 years for buildings inside of the 3 mile zone and every 30 years outside the 3 mile zone. And it's not more complicated than that. The SEERS study, the reserve study, has to be budgeted in 2024 to take effect in 2025. And you can't get a SEERS study without the MSR. So you can't have a budget report without doing the structural integrity reports. And so that's why they run hand in hand.
Yeah. I want to interject here just 1 second. So both these reports, both the engineer report and the reserve study report, have to be finished by the end of 2024. So December 31st, they actually have to have these reports done. And then at that point, which is really important as an agent here, because we're agents on, is that now becomes public record. They have to share those reports with the local building department, and they will have to be shared with potential buyers as well. And then of course, all the owners in the condo will get a copy of the report as well.
So here's the way it works is from a time frame perspective, the associations have to start interviewing engineers immediately. Here's why. The MSR, it has two phases, phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 2 kicks in if they find, so the first phase of the milestone structural reporting is a visual inspection. That's phase 1. If it fails, they go to phase 2. Phase 2 is where they do destructive testing, boring and sampling and earth samples and things like that. Phase 1 can take 1 to 2 months. Phase 2, if it's required, can take 1 to 4 months. And then you got to develop your budgeting plan, Sears, and that can take 1 to 2 months. And then planning to get on the agenda for the board can take 1 to 2 months. So very quickly, you're at a year, right? So if you start interviewing engineering consultants right now, there's a couple of dozen in Florida that do this stuff. Literally, there's hundreds of condos and a couple of dozen consulting engineers that are going to do this stuff. You can see very quickly, if it takes you a year to go through the cycle of getting this thing done and everybody's calling the engineers, you're going to have to be waiting in line to get an engineer. So it's not going to be, you call them, they show up. It's a lengthy engagement process. There are some potential problems with the law. One of the potential problems, and I'm going to give you the potential problems right off the bat. So as we go through this stuff, we can think about it. What if the owners are liable for the windows? Like in some associations, the association is liable for the windows. In some association, the unit owners are liable for the windows. How does an association collect an assessment for something the owners are liable for? Just something that has to be worked out. There's some elements of the language that are contrary. They discuss about the common elements and the common areas. That's not something that you guys need to focus on. There will be modifications to the law likely for boards to obtain loans in the absence of being able to put together the necessary reserves. It's not there yet, but they're going to likely have those laws added to the bill. And then what about renters? So Ryan mentioned that owners have to give copies of the report to buyers once the reports are out. But tenants have a right to those reports as well. Do
Yes.
landlords have a duty to give that to tenants? That's not in the law, but clearly in the law is that tenants have a right to those reports. So let's get back to what does it apply to? The milestone reporting applies to the roof, the load-bearing walls, all the structural members, including the floors, the foundation, seawalls, fireproofing, fire protection systems. Again, this is all in the outline. Plumbing, electrical, waterproofing, painting, and anything over $10,000 that affects those elements. So it pretty much applies to everything, because you'd be hard-pressed to find something that wasn't on that list that didn't affect something on that list, and everything costs more than $10,000 nowadays. We all know that. That the MSR, the milestone reporting, is designed to preserve life, right? It's not just a bunch of people justifying their job. It's designed to preserve life. If we think back to Surfside, it's where it's born from. The reporting we talked about has 2 phases, a visual phase, and then if it fails the visual phase, the structural integrity phase, where they do destructive testing, bore holes in the concrete, all those good things. Look at the soil samples. Like Ryan said, the reporting, Sears, has to be in the 2025 budget, and the associations are usually voting those things in October. The association has to send, now here's addressing what Ryan was saying, both the milestone reporting and Sears goes to the building official in the municipality, and it goes to the association. And then the association has to provide it to all the unit owners, they have to leave it in a conspicuous spot, and they have to put it on the website. So the engineers are responsible to get it to the association. The association's responsible to get it to the municipalities and then post it to all the relevant spots. The board members are liable for failure to comply. We're going to get into that a little bit more. The condominium association has to maintain the report for 15 years. It's not defined what maintaining it is, but that's what they're obligated to do.
I wanted to add to part of this bill too, that this is every 10 years after this initial milestone, they have to do it again. So they have to do the reserve study and the milestone test every 10 years, Jim.
Right. And I failed to mention that up front.
So, yeah. So it's like, this is an ongoing process for these condos. And part of that, I do want to make sure that as an agent that becomes relative to us is, you might have a lot of these owners crossing their fingers that, hey, we're gonna pass this milestone inspection report. Like, our building is well made. Okay, that's great. But that second part of that bill with that reserve study requirements, they now have to, by law, put the money into reserves. They can't vote, these improvements like the roof needs to be replaced or the windows or the electric. They need to start putting those money in reserves. So like the worst case scenario, there's something structural and they have to put that money aside to a special reserve. Well, they're still going to have additional reserves for the other future life of these other items for the building, whether it be the roof or the electric or the plumbing. So they can't vote that out. Jim, before, a lot of condos, and this is a study here, okay, and I've researched this, 10% of condos are fully funded reserves, only 10% of condos. And there's 20,000 condos in condo associations in Florida. Only 10% are fully 20,000. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I know. So and out of those, only 10% are fully funded reserves. Okay. So the rest have some partial reserves, but actually little over 50% have no reserves. Okay. So we're talking a massive impact, on the South Florida condo market. That this bill is going to have. And all these people.
What you bring up is something that's really important, that prior to SB4D, you could vote on, you had something that needed to be fixed, like so the roof had to be done. And then the board would vote on what the reserves were going to look like. But then the members could vote down the dollar value of those reserves.
They would. They could vote down to not have reserves. That's a big part of this bill, though. Bill, I mean, Jim, is they can't do that They can't do that anymore.
Under SB4D, if it's identified in SERS, they by law have to set aside those reserves.
Yes,
that's the case.
Yes.
So you have that whole stretch of condominiums with the infamous people coming down from Canada who've been deferring maintenance issues for the last, 40 years, realistically 40 years plus. Now, when the board votes to replace the roof and we're going to put this much in reserves, the money actually has to be there and it can't be voted down by the members.
Yeah. I mean, I have a listing that I'm working on right now in Presidential Way, those high rises, in Presidential. And they've been kicking the can down the road for over 20 years, and the plumbing's bad, the electric's bad, everything's bad.
And so now they can't. And there's no provision in the law that allows you to replace those reserves with loans. So I was going to talk about it a little bit later, but we'll get to it now. If you have a reserves requirement under Sears, just securing a loan doesn't vacate your requirement to put aside the reserves.
Yeah.
So there's lenders that are going to be providing these loans and lobbying heavily the legislature to rewrite certain aspects of this law. And one of them is going to be to set aside the cash requirement for the reserves and replace it with a loan requirement. It's important to note that we're doing this podcast on, what is it today, March 8th? And March 7th. And that's the state of the law, March 7th, 2023. That can change very quickly. So if anybody's watching this podcast at a later date, it's important to fact check some of this stuff because this law is going to be agile.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So can I ask a quick question about that? So I just want to make sure I got that right. So you're saying if there is a reserve requirement found after the SERS,
yep,
they still have to fund it. They cannot use a loan.
they can't, right now, the state of the law is it can't be funded with a loan and the cash has to be set aside. Separate from what a lot of associations do, which is called pooling, right? So if you have a 10-year use, if you have a roof that costs $100,000 and it's got a 10-year useful life and you're 6 years into it, there's 4 more years. The association has to put aside $10,000 a year to replace that roof in year 10. So they got to have money from the past and money into the future. There has to be $100,000 there after 10 years. That can't be pooled with other monies. It has to be separate.
It's a line item. Actually,
it has to be a line item if it's identified in Sears, and it can't be supplanted with a loan, and it can't be voted down by the board.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say they do the study and they need a roof and they need, I don't know, something else. So each thing has to have its own, each item, let's say they need to do the stairs, right?
Yeah.
We're having issues in a condo community right now where there's cracks in the stairwells. So each of those have to have their own line item and their own kind of line item in the reserves.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what's important about this though is that there's cracks in the stairs. It could be a structural issue. So that's why it's really important why they created this law with the different, is you should do the structural integrity test first, right? So that should be done first, and then the reserve study. Both have to be done by the end of 2024 because it could be a structural issue, right? That,
right.
That this is a symptom of the cracking in the stairs. So, that's why they're requiring the first part of this, which is the structural integrity test, and then do the reserve study. But both.
So that was a really good question. That got me over a whole bunch of information I had in my outline, which is the mandatory nature of these reserves and things like that. So that was good timing. And I have a bit of bright news that's coming out of this, and that is that the legislature, and that is that the CPAs have opined on the fact that if you have a special assessment under Sears, if you have a special assessment under SB4D, that portion of your assessment that was paid to satisfy SB4D is actually added to your basis. Okay. So when a seller sells, if they have, like I have a condo down the street, they have a $80,000 special assessment. If that assessment they bought for $300,000, the places are selling now for close to $1 million. If that special assessment was under SB4D, specifically identified in Sears, then they can actually add that 80 grand to the 300,000 in basis and deduct that from income.
Okay.
Well, that's one bright spot.
We need to be all doom and gloom, right? We got to come up with something good, right? So if you have,
so you don't have to pay a capital gain on,
you're going to exclude the value of the Sears assessment from your income.
So
ahead.
Can I ask a question regarding you? I know you might get to it regarding the condo association and the board and so I'm dealing with a condo association right now that in the last 3 years has had 3 management companies, and for part of that time was self-managed. And we see that in a lot of these.
Get to that in question and answer, because there's some stuff I'm going to talk about that I think addresses that. Most consulting engineers are going to give free consultations. So it's incumbent for board members right now to start contacting these consulting engineers. So I'm going to give you guys a list of the vendors. So you've got consulting engineers that are going to do the studies for structure, and then you're actually going to have under Sears, you're going to have consultants that are able to give the values for the reserves. So gone are going to be the days.
But they still have to be a licensed engineer to do the Sears study, Jim. But they can still actually have a subset of special consultants that could actually figure out the actual dollar amount. That doesn't have to be an engineer.
Right.
But it actually has to be a licensed engineer too for the Sears.
Engineers have to do the MRS reports, but you're going to need to have somebody that's not going to be your board picking and choosing the roof consultant that has the lowest price roof generating the Sears study. So you're going to have potentially, like Ryan said, it could be the same person, but it could be the same group, but it's not going to be like it used to be where boards were able to pick and choose from a bunch of consultants that they called and said, oh, we're going to have the lowest guy do the lowest group do the roof and et cetera. I think this might go to some part of your question, Shane, to avoid liability of a board member, right? So there's a unique element of the statute that says board members can be personally, financially liable for failure to act. And so to avoid, so let's just assume, right, you're going to be hard pressed to find people who want to be on the board, but people who are on the board that want to take action don't want to be liable. So what do? And this is kind of getting into the meat of the matter that we want to talk about today. How do we avoid liability, and what are the remedies in this thing? And so if you're a board member and you're on an association, you want to give notice to the rest of the board. You want to give notice to the members. You want to give notice to the association. You want to give notice to the attorney for the association in writing in a mass email that says SB4D is real. And here's some consultants that can give us advice, and we got to get started on this thing. Because what happens is there's another topic we're going to talk about is what are the remedies? If there's a failure, there's going to be a cause of action. There's going to be a lawsuit potentially against that board member personally. So how do you avoid that? You want to stay on the board. You just have to know what the rules are and put everybody on notice that you want to comply and they're not. And then you also want to put on notice the division of corporations. The division of condominium. It's important to note that boards are going to have to comply with local requirements, and they're, in addition to MSRs and SIRs, they're going to have to also, like in Miami and Broward, and have their own reporting cycles to under local ordinances. So theoretically, you could be turning in multiple reports in any one year. And then the people who are going to be reviewing the reports under your local ordinances are also going to be responsible for reviewing your reports under MRS.
Yeah, let's not get too confused. But Miami-Dade has had their own 40 and 50-year certification. Kind of parallels this new law. It actually affects 2-story condos, not just 3-story and above. Yeah, but, let's not get too confused on it. The big thing here in Palm Beach, we've never had a certification process. We've talked about it, but now this is mandated by the state, with this milestone inspection report and then the reserve study that have to be done. So, it's new from Palm Beach, and that's who's, I think, most of the people that are on the call, Jim, from Palm Beach.
So and it's important to note, there's no opinion shopping, right? So in Surfside, the initial report warned of major structural defects. The board subsequently hired another engineer who gave a no structural warning in their report. No action was taken by the board, and in actuality, there were some contrary actions taken by the board in the face of this report that the first engineer gave, and the building collapsed, right? So this is real. There's no opinion shopping. Let's say you get a structural engineer to say it needs a roof and stairways, but then the second structural engineer says it only needs stairways. There's no going back to that second structural engineer. The first structural engineer who said it needs roof and stairways is going to be the standard that the association has to comply under. If phase 2 finds failure defects in the foundations, roof, floors, structural elements, and even the seawalls, the building could likely be deemed uninhabitable. And the unit owners forbid from returning to the building. So what does that mean? If the building is deemed uninhabitable, it's going to be a new process, kind of in reverse, but it's going to be, in essence, it's going to be condemned if these reports come out, like the phase 2 report comes out and says there are structural issues. No one's going to be permitted to reside in the building. And then the tough one becomes like, so part of the building is structurally unsound. Are we going to condemn the entire building? And there's going to be some confusions, and I'll get into some more, like who's most.
Yeah, but here Brian just asked a quick question, and we can do it now, or else we can save it to the end. He asked, are the inspections public record to prevent opinion shopping? Great question. So part of the bill is they become public record as soon as they're done. They're actually shared from the engineer to the local building department. So at that point, they are public record, right? So now could the association go and get another engineer report? Of course, but the other one is still sitting there because by Senate Bill 4D is the engineer has to share it with the local building department. And then, of course, the association gets a copy of that, and there's requirement that they have to share that report with the whole, with all the unit owners, potential owners, renters.
So let's just say in your wildest imagination, some association got 2 reports. They can't pick and choose which report they publish.
No, they'd have to share both the reports.
Yep.
So that kind of brings up my next question. We have a lot of small condos that self-manage, that don't use a management company. Are they going to now have to, that's going to be I know they have attorneys, but they're going to have
No, if they're over 3 stories and they're more than 4 units or more, they have to comport, even if they're self-managed.
Yeah.
And that leads into my next point. There'll be buildings that vote to terminate their condominium because the business model just doesn't make sense. So if the condominium is terminated, nobody can legally, lawfully reside in the building anymore. And because of their business model, a typical age and reputation for deferring maintenance to keep assessments low, co-ops that are on long-term land leases are going to be especially vulnerable to failing the business model, the long-term business model. So that's like one of the hallmarks of condominiums is I'm going to go to this co-ops is I'm going to go to this really inexpensive place, but those guys are going to be especially vulnerable for terminating.
Yeah. And if you've sold co-ops here, you've seen they don't, their maintenance isn't, top notch, right? Because it's obviously a concern to the unit owners. It's obviously tough to get financing in co-ops, which let's just touch on this really quick is what if, let's talk, Jim, about what if they don't comply and what are the ramifications? Okay. Well, there would be a major issue if they don't get these milestone inspection reports and the reserve study reports done by 2024. What lender now would lend on a building for a unit in a building that does not have these reports done?
Yeah, and that was the next couple of points I was going to bring up. Board members can be personally liable for failing to take action on SB4D. Yeah. But in law, we call that, what is the cause of action? So if somebody lives in a unit and the board doesn't take action, is it strict liability where they're liable just for failing to take action? Or does the cause of action only arise if the building fails? Or is there a cause of action against the board member because there's a diminution in value?
Yes.
So let's just say the building was worth X, your unit was worth X, and this really damaging report comes out, and now the building is worth something less than X, and the board was, really conservative and hired this incredible engineer that said they needed 1 million things done when actually only 900,000 things were needed to be done. Does the unit owner have a cause of action against the board member for diminution in value? I think we would all agree if they said that the board members can be liable. If the board member doesn't act and the building fails and people hurt, absolutely they're liable.
For sure they're liable. But if they take no action on this and they don't do the inspection report and they don't do the reserve study, report, that's going to detrimentally affect the value of their condo, because I couldn't imagine a lender financing that. Right.
And these board members are financially liable. That's expressly what I know.
So they could be sued. They could be sued, by their own owners if they don't comply to this.
There's even changes in the law that are contemplated where associations could sue contractors who made improvements to the property that led to the defects, if the defects were. But right now, statutes of repose and statutes of limitation would preclude unit owners from, say, suing the builder, right? Because there's statutes of limitation and repose. But they're talking about changes to the law to make these people in the chain of providing the services and constructing the condo liable. And then, like Ryan was saying, what are the avenues of remedy? Local government building offices will have copies of these reports, copies of the reserve studies, and they will have the power of violations for failure to comply, potentially leading to violation notices, liens, and potentially condemnation. But this is still being sorted out. But the fact that these reports are going to be provided to the local building officials requires them, they can't have this information and not act on it.
So it's true. Let's, because we got a bunch of agents here on Jim, including myself. Let's talk about the here and now, right? So we're sitting here, we have clients that have condos in these older buildings, and we're letting them know about this. Obviously creates urgency for them to sell, right? You're informing them. They're like, okay, we want to sell. We want to sell. And now you want to list the property for sale. What do you have to do, Jim, as an agent to comply with, letting the potential buyers disclosures, what you need to share? Let's cover that real quick.
Good question, Ryan. So I want to bring you guys, can you see my screen? No, it doesn't look like it.
Yeah, I can see your screen. We can see it.
Can you see the contract?
Yeah, but there's like two part. You have the outline, and then you have the contract. If you could close that other window to the left.
Let's see. Screen share.
Because this is what's important. You don't want to feel like, obviously you want to help your clients out, sell this, if they want to get out now, but you don't want to feel like that you're doing something wrong, right? If you're selling the unit.
So here you have a section of the contract called disclosures. You have the seller's disclosure. The Jonson v. Davis rule gets you out of trouble. There's 3 elements to the Jonson v. Davis rule. They're clearly set out in this disclosures section on line 250. Again, I'll give you guys an outline. The seller has a duty to disclose under 3 conditions. If the seller has knowledge, seller knows of no material effects affecting the value, which are not readily observable. So the seller has knowledge, right? Everybody knows about SB4D. The seller has knowledge, so they should be telling everything they know. Does it materially affect value? Potentially, yes, right? $5,000 on a $100,000 sale materially affects value. May not affect the $1 million sale, but $50,000 assessment or something big like that. So they have a duty to disclose. However, under Jonson v. Davis, if it's readily observable, the seller doesn't have to disclose it.
Yeah.
So that's how agents can feel good about, right? Because if you tell everything you know about this rule, you're going to shock your buyers and sellers into paralysis. And so I'm not suggesting that you conceal, but what I'm suggesting is that under Jonson v. Davis, you don't have a duty to disclose the gravity or the severity of the rule. Your duty is just to disclose what needs to be disclosed. And here's what needs to be disclosed. If you look in the condominium association section, the condominium association rider.
So this is the rider, the condominium association rider.
And everything we're referring to is from the Florida FAR Bar, the most recent version of the Florida FAR Bar. If you have any question with that, you just look at the very bottom. It says revised 10/21/2021. That's the most recent version. There's a condominium rider that's been around for a lot longer. Oh no, this was revised 10/21 as well. So the condominium rider says, seller represents that seller is not aware of any special assessments or other assessments that have been levied by the association or that has been an item on the agenda or reported in the minutes of the association within the last 12 months prior to the effective date. And if you look further down, it says if special assessments levied or pending existing on the effective date have not been disclosed by the seller, then seller shall pay such assessments in full at the time of closing. So what does that mean? Agents have to go back. They have to look at the records of the association minutes and agenda for the year prior to the sale. And I would say just give them to the buyer. Don't make any representations. You're already dumping on them frequently asked questions, the budget, the bylaws, the corporate docs, all those other things. Dump on them a copy of the minutes. Don't go through and parse it out yourself. Just dump it on them.
Just put it all in one big Dropbox file. You know what I mean? And share the link. Share the link to it. They have the minutes. They have it all there. Remember, you don't have to, it only becomes effective when the report's actually done. When the report is there, you have to share that.
At that point, that has to be shared, right?
That has to be shared.
But every minute of our professional careers, up to the time the MRS or the SIRS has been delivered to the association, it's a non-issue.
Yep.
Unless the topic has been discussed in the board or appeared in the agenda. Then you got to disclose it. But like Ryan's saying, generate that document, throw it in the Dropbox, and let the buyer's agent sort it out. And if you're a buyer's agent and you're not getting that stuff, make sure you get a copy of it, because if you do get buyers or sellers that get cold feet about a sale, specifically buyers, and you haven't delivered that stuff, that's going to be an easy out for them.
Yeah.
If
You have an out if they don't deliver, obviously, from the association with frequently asked questions, the corporate docs, bylaws, all that
budget.
stuff. They have to have that regardless. We've always had to have that, right? But adding the minutes in there, is a great way, as a listing agent, that it's all there, right?
You just got to make it part of your job, right? And then you've not run afoul of Jonson v. Davis.
Yeah.
Not run afoul of the disclosure duties in the contract and the disclosure section, right? You can find it. It's easy. It's got a heading on it, the seller's disclosures. Now you can do these transactions and not, like I say, kind of tongue in cheek, not feel dirty about it. There's nothing wrong with what you've done as long as you disclose. And you don't have to go through and parse it all out as long as you make it all available. Yep. It's incumbent on buyers to sit and parse it all out.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
All right. That's all I had for today. If anybody wants to get into question and answers, did you have anything else you want to talk about, Brian?
No, I just want to because we're agents here of how this affects us, right? And how it affects our clients that we're working for. You do have, you can use this as a tool to create urgency. If you've had some sellers that are on the fence in some of these older buildings, to let them know, right? Obviously, if you have buyers that you've been working for, to let them know about it, that it's there, that this is what's happening. Obviously, that would be a great agent, could help you, put them into something else, right? That could help them create some urgency to put them into something else. And, because what's not affected, if you're looking at it as an agent's perspective, remember, 2-story condos aren't affected, single family homes, townhomes, those aren't affected. If you're looking here as an agent, where was this shifted? You could be having a lot of owners moving from these older condos that are going to be looking for other types of properties, so that could put a more of a tighter constraint on the already tight inventory for those products. So,
well, Ryan, you bring up a really good point. And I had we have clients over the years in Pompano and Hollywood where they have these little 5-unit, 6-unit, 7-unit self-managed buildings. That's a great opportunity. All these things have dramatic deferred maintenance. They're 3 stories. They're on the water, and all these guys have all been, guys and women, to be fair, have been kicking the can on maintenance down the road for years. And so that there's a great marketing opportunity there. Did you know, right? So it's a small association. They're not in the know, and you drop some copy on them. Did you know? Are you aware? These things are real. It's going to kind of be a weird situation though, right? Because typically you got a developer that approaches a board, or the developer approaches and they say, hey, are you guys interested in selling? And then the members all vote. This is going to be the cart before the horse. This is going to be a dramatic Sears report that says, hey, you guys have this financial burden, and then people vote to not that they can't make that financial burden, so they vote to dismantle.
What is the threshold? Because I've heard 2 numbers. Is it 75 or 80? What's the threshold for the number of owners to dismantle an association? What is the threshold?
I have to get you more specifics on that. Okay. I know it numbers in that area, but I don't know exactly.
I know I've heard 75 and then I've heard 80 as well.
Well, the last one that I was part to was 80, but I don't know if that was by decks or by the law. So the decks are specific to that building, or if it was by statute.
Exactly. So we have some questions and answers. We've answered some questions as we've gone. If you have any questions, now would be the time for you to put it in chat or ask it. I know it's a lot to unpack.
I have a few questions.
Go ahead, Katie.
You had said, Ryan, that every 10 years, but sorry, my notes are messy. Every 10 years, but I thought we said 25 years within 3 miles from the beach, and then 20 years close to the beach. But you have to do these reports every 10 years, or is it 25?
So they have a follow-up. They have to do a follow-up, basically go through the same process. So the qualifications, if it's 25 years, if it's over 3 stories within 3 miles of the coastline, right? If it's outside the 3 miles, it's 30 years is the report. is when they need to do the inspection report and the reserve study report. And then once they do those reports, which are due by the end of 2024, they have to do this again every 10 years. They have to do it again every 10 years.
So I don't understand why there's 25 and 20 come in if it's already due. So really they have to do it every 10 years?
No,
Okay,
just from this point. Yeah, this is the, when they have to do the phase 1 milestones, but they're going to have to do this same process again 10 years later.
Oh, 25 years old. I thought it was 25.
Oh, okay. 25 years or older. Sorry about that confusion on that.
No,
So
yeah.
the way it historically worked was you had to do these things every 40 years. Now,
In Miami-Dade, Jim, not here in Palm Beach. We never had that requirement in Palm Beach.
oh, it wasn't even a Palm Beach requirement?
No, that's what I'm saying. It's why it really hits Palm Beach. There's condos here, Jim, that are 40, 50 years old that have never
been reported on. Wow.
No.
So
Miami-Dade's been doing it for like I said, I think since the mid 80s, they've been doing it, but not here.
So the first milestone report is due in 25 years from the date of the certificate of occupancy was issued, if you're within 3 miles of the beach, and 10 years thereafter. If you're more than 3 miles from the coastline, I'm calling the beach the coastline, then you have to do your first milestone report 30 years from the date of their certificate of occupancy, and then every 10 years thereafter. So if you're more than 3 miles from the beach, they're giving you a break on the initial reporting year.
they're giving you 5 years. I don't know why they just didn't keep it across the board and just say 25 for simple, because there's going to be probably condos that, you might have the whole complex part of the complex is right on the line. Part of it isn't, who knows? I don't know why they made that, but.
Well, there's whole engineering firms and there's whole law firms. I've been sitting in on these panel discussions that have geared up for this thing, just for this thing. Like it reminds me of tobacco litigation. It reminds me of the whole pill mill litigation and the
pretty much just if they're condos over, to answer your question, Katie, if it's condos over 25 years or older within 3 miles, they have to do this. And remember, it has to be over 3 stories. So it's 3 stories or above. So if it's 2 stories or lower, this bill does not apply to them.
And it's going to take a year. If you know people on the board, you want to spring them into action earlier than later, because it's going to take a year between the time the consulting engineer comes out and looks at the property visually, potentially until the board actually acts on a budget. If you back the time frames down, that's what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Each component takes a couple of months. And if you have to do a phase 2, that can be 4 months.
Yeah. Go ahead, Katie, you had another question?
Oh, I put them in the notes. Yeah. So, so this is only if it's 25 years older. So like something built 20 years ago, like this doesn't apply.
Yeah,
Correct.
It doesn't apply.
It will soon.
It will once they hit that 25 years. Yeah, they'll have to do it. But for right now, they don't have to comply.
But if it's in Central Florida, then they technically have 25 years.
Correct.
30
They have
years.
30 years
30 years.
for the first time that they have to do the substantial reporting and budgeting, structural inspections and budgeting, but then it's still 10 years every year thereafter.
Okay, great. And this only applies to Florida, correct?
Correct. So
So far.
Florida.
Awesome.
And it's in response to, quite frankly, it's in response to Surfside, but then all the insurance companies that were pulling out of Surfside. So one thing we failed to mention when we were running through the outline is you have insurance companies and you have lending companies, underwriters that are going to want to see copies of these reports. So obviously, if you're an insurer or a lender and you're lending on the building or you're insuring the building, you're going to want to see a copy of this report. But the interesting question is, what if you're a unit owner looking for insurance? What if you're a unit owner looking for a loan? Are these reports going to be a portion of that underwriting decision?
Yeah. Yes, Jim. That's what I'm saying. Like they're now when the condo questionnaire that these lenders send over, right? They're obviously going to add, your engineer report and your reserve study report, and they're going to want to, you look at that for their underwriting. That's what I'm saying. If you don't do it, that's like the worst, because you gotta have it. Go ahead.
So from a lending perspective, typically, if you want to avoid the condo questionnaire, you just put 25% down. SB4D will not be looped out of that equation if you put 25% down. The lenders are still going to be looking for these SB4D compliant, and you can't just put money down to get around it.
But you can't opt out of the SB4D requirement even by putting down more than 25%.
Correct. At least that's how my understanding is. That's how we are going to be looking at it.
Wow.
We've got our own in-house condo approval, so whether you put 25% down or not, we know the building's not going to be compliant, and it's going to be blacklisted because it's not compliant. We won't.
I mean, there
lend
you
it.
go.
So then the question that gets begged is, if you look at Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, you had entire communities where loans couldn't be issued because insurance couldn't be obtained, and then you're only in cash buyers. And then you get to a point where, okay, the building hasn't been condemned, but since we can't get lending going, we don't have active lenders in the building. The business model might be to elect to sell. The business model might be to dismantle the association, to the condominium declaration. And
yeah. Well, I think Brian's speaking to the individual units. Yeah. I think
Brian I'm saying unit owners, if I'm a unit owner, right, and I can only get cash buyers, I might vote to dismantle the condominium.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's true. Let me ask this, Brian, do you have any experience on lending side of actually lending to the association? Let's say they need repairs. Do they then lean the common elements? Is that how they,
Yes.
Yeah.
We've done those transactions.
Yeah. Okay.
I was going to say that's right now beyond my experience. But after this conversation, I'm going to be looking into lending to condos to fund this.
I mean, they have to fund it. Like if there's something like
business.
No, it's going to be a massive business.
Well, there's a huge discussion among insurance underwriters, and that is get something in the legislature that says you don't have to make cash reserves, you just have to have secured loans. Right. But that's only kicking the can down the road, in my opinion, because now
they still have to pay back the loan, Jim. I mean, they still have to pay the loan.
Instead of having an $8,000 assessment, you now have $160,000.
I mean, there could be literally a business set up where you're just a consultant to literally decide like what's that cost basis value? Is it worth it or not to make these repairs? Versus just sell this to a developer. I mean, because there's going to be a lot of condos that fall into that category.
There's going to be, instead of
well, according to you, it's going to be 18,000 of them.
Yeah, there's
right.
Yeah,
if there's 20,000 condos, 90% of them are not fully funded. How many of them can actually go ahead, do an assessment to completely bring it up to current reserves?
Yeah,
not many. So it's 18,000 of them that are likely going to be clients looking to borrow the funds.
Yeah. So the 20,000 number, from my understanding, is all condos. So remember, not all of them qualify if they're under 3 stories, right?
Right.
And if they're not 25 years or older within 3 miles. So that, it comes down a little bit. But yeah, you make a really valued point. I mean, it's just, the opportunity, as an agent, as a real estate professional, in something like this, there becomes massive opportunity. We're literally talking about it right now, how they could be opportunities,
Shane, I cut you off earlier in the conversation. Did I address your questions, or were there some?
Yeah, you answered most of my questions, but one more thing came up. So we're talking about owners maybe voting to disband the condo association.
Terminate the condo.
So if that happens, is there any other entity that would step in and say these buildings still have to be repaired, that they're not safe?
Explain further. So if
my understanding was,
so we're sitting around as the members, right? And the board did their SIRS, and they say, okay, we're looking at the need to put up $80,000 in reserves, right? And so people take a vote, the members take a vote, and they say, we would rather abandon the condominium declaration than pay these monies. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So if that happens, is there any other entity? So the whole point that they want to disband is to not have to follow these rules, right? Because they don't have the funds. So is there any other entity that's going to step in to make sure these buildings are safe and that the work gets done?
Well, I mean, I can imagine a scenario where the members sit around and say, if you got one of these older co-ops, and it's going to be not a far stretch to imagine 10, 20, $30 million in repairs, literally. I mean, if it's the foundation, it's not even a matter of repair.
Or it's a seawall. I mean,
Right,
seawall.
right.
I learned this morning that a seawall defect can leave the building structurally defective and require the people to abandon the building.
Yes.
Mhm.
We can live there.
And there's a lot of these co-ops that they their seawalls are ancient. They haven't been done. Nothing's been done for years and years.
That
and
same
years.
corridor, you got that whole, from Southern Boulevard south. But anyways, but what I'm not following in your question is, so is there anyone that's going to step in? I mean, what's going to happen is there are going to be someone's to step in, but they're going to be builders. They're going to be developers that are going to suffer the property. There's no governing authority that's going to prop the safety elements of the building up. The governing authorities are there to examine the structural, the MRS.
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually having a conversation with the building tomorrow. I'm actually meeting with the building, regardless to this, where it is an older building, they're on the water. They've literally kicked the can down for 30 years. And the owners are probably, already know that they want to sell. But I've told them, I'm like, listen, if you wait till this report comes back and this becomes more and more, well, that just creates more inventory for the developers, right? So you're probably going to get less price. So if you do want to sell now, like now is the time. And most of these owners, honestly, they know this, I just want to add this. They know if they've been kicking the can down the road, right? They know. They know that they haven't been doing what they've needed to do, especially if it's on the water and their seawall is having issues and everything's having issues. So,
well, that brings up the other point. We were talking about how you say they have to have the cash, that they can't just get a loan, right? Because the loan is kicking it down. But in some of these older condos, you have people that are living there now who bought years ago that are on fixed income, and you're going to assess them and they can't afford the assessment. Taking out a loan and then giving them the option to pay in installments is going to be their only option.
Yeah. Which right? I could see that happening, like that bill getting amended for that gym. Like I can't imagine. I mean, that's, as long as they have the money there, right? And now, okay, let's say my HOA went from $500 a month to, $1,500.
Yeah.
I mean, which probably is realistic.
Yeah. And some of these people can't afford it.
Yeah. Then they're going to have to sell. They're going to have to sell, and that's now you're competing with all the other building owners that are going to sell. So it's going to push the prices down, but then comes as an agent with an opportunity, it's like, well, wait a second, there's a developer that could pay this. So here's our number here from the developer. Here's the individual units if we all sell. And that's what I'm saying. The opportunity for these developers is there,
So we really want to be in a position to educate our sellers, educate our board members. And so I'm going to give you guys a list of consulting engineers and lenders and people who are putting together SIRS studies. But in that list is also going to be banks. And so Truist Bank is really getting ahead of the ball, and they're lobbying the legislature to amend the bill. They're calling it a glitch addendum. And in the glitch addendum, they're talking about amending the law so that loans can be obtained today to set aside the requirement for cash reserves. But I think, outside of the context of the law, I think from a personal perspective, that's just kicking the can down the road. If you can't afford, it's going to be a financial burden. You're exactly right, Shane. You've got these older co-ops, you've got these older buildings, and what Ryan was saying earlier is exactly on point. They know they've been deferring maintenance. And that one example of Ryan's building where they're saying, let's sell now before this thing is a train wreck. They're just getting ahead of the ball because they know it's inevitable that they have, and they may have been talking to engineers already, and they haven't done a formal MERS
I
study.
mean, there's a lot of these. They just been sticking their head in the sand, Jim.
And they could do it under the old law.
They could. I mean, it used to be, like I said, that the associations could vote not to have reserves. So it's like, they voted themselves to not have reserves,
Right.
And they just kept going and putting Band-Aids on things. So
This will not come as a surprise.
awesome. Any other questions?
Yeah, I typed a few in. One of them is you had said only 10% of condos are fully funded. What were those other numbers you said? 50% were
have no reserves. So this is a study, that I've read, and I could, I'd like to share the link if I could find it. But it's they've done studies on what percentage of condos in Florida have fully funded reserves. It's 10%, and like I said, over half don't have any reserves. That's taking account to all condos, though. You know what I mean? They're talking 2-story, 3-story, all condos. Yep.
And is this legislation? This is to prevent upcoming assessments, right? So once everyone gets financially on track, then they're required to stay on track. Is that right?
No, this is to save lives. In the eyes of the legislature, all this is to save lives. But in 10 years or more, this whole thing will shake out, and then we'll return back to a stable condo market. But it won't be the condo market that we've known in the past. Florida is a cheap place to come and cohabitate in a condominium and share common expenses. They're going to be, the places that have deferred maintenance are going to go away, quite frankly. And the places that are up to par, the places that are newer, the places that have reserves are probably going to sell at a premium, but that's going to be the waterfront community of the future. It's not going to be, I hate to use this example over and over, but Pompano and Hollywood and all those places in Broward with those little condos by the water that have been deferring maintenance forever, those are going away. They're going to be replaced by luxury units. No one's going to build affordable housing by the water, and it's going to be destinations for people all over the world. I mean, quite frankly, COVID put Florida on the map. It's the perfect storm of events, and people are still coming to Florida, but it's not the people that were coming to Florida before. I mean, we're still seeing some of those people, but the new people coming to Florida are all coming from New York and Amsterdam and Denmark and Germany and, places we've never had people coming to Florida from before, California and Colorado and Denver. I mean, we've been working with clients from destination spots that we never worked with before in volumes. And so it's a shift in the landscape, and it'll probably.
It is. Waterfront property in South Florida has become
It's going to take 10 years.
A luxury product, right? I mean, even if they do save some of these older condos, they'll go up in price as well, once this whole thing, as Jim points out. But awesome. We're at 11:02, Jim.
You guys, the time flew by. I don't know about you, but I enjoyed myself.
This has been one of our best ones. Thank you so much for asking the questions. So, let me give a quick recap of Real Trade. So I want to let you know, Real Trade's free for agents, okay? And you create a profile, you now are searchable to thousands of buyers and sellers in Real Trade. You own your own listings, okay? Buyers and sellers can contact you directly off your own listings. There's agents that have actually used just this feature and have made tens of thousands of dollars in Real Trade. So I want you to sign up and create a profile on there. Number two is we have a whole social network to the platform where you can actually leverage the power of the thousands of agents and tons of service providers to help you sell properties quicker. Be happy to do a demo for you. Go to realtrade.io, sign up. It's free. And Jim's a service provider there. We have lenders that are on there that you can connect with. We have contractors, inspectors, appraisers that want to contact with you and help your real estate business. So,
I think Real Trade is the model of the future. I'm gonna plug Real Trade for a minute. I've seen firsthand agents contacting me saying how valuable it is, saying that it allowed them. And I tell Ryan all the time, it's the shortest route to the double dip. I think if you're a selling agent and your buyers can contact you directly, I think that's magic, and there's no cost to agents. And I think that's the model of the future. At New Path Title, we offer 24/7 attorney support for the agents we're working with. You guys can text me 24/7. Just go on newpathtitle.com. You got my cell phone number right there. We'll get you through any transactional friction. I get calls all the time from agents that are working on transactions we're not closing. and I don't mind providing support on all that stuff. We have a new product called Title Advance. If you're walking into a listing appointment, you bring your title advance with you. You can look like the most prepared agent. So your seller elects you when they're listing that, when they're interviewing those 4 or 5 agents. Title advance has been a differentiator and helped a lot of people get listings. And I hear firsthand from agents how well it works. It also greases the rails to closing. So now we had one the other day where there was an easy code violation that had been in the record for 10 years. Nobody discovered it until 2 weeks before closing. And then code violation, the lien mitigation process is 3 to 6 months backed up. So now they got to delay closing. That would definitely have been, we could have definitely prevented that with the title advance. Title leap, everybody raves about it. It saves
Let me interject here, Jim. I've been doing real estate for over 20 years, like a lot of you have been doing a long time. And I have actually used New Path Title with their awesome software, Title Leap. Let me tell you, it's a contract coordinator that you get for free. Okay. It tracks all the drop dead dates in the contract for you right there in real time. You're notified not only through the app, through email, through text. Okay. Everybody can communicate at one spot. It saved me personally on some drop dead dates that I forgot about. For instance, if you had the mortgage contingency was up. And then, as Jim mentioned, this title advanced, man, you bring that to a listing appointment, bring a title advance, and you know that there's a lien on the property or something that the seller wasn't aware of. Now that you can adjust the price on the listing, you're like a hero that goes into a listing agreement. So it's a great tool and it's free for us agents, both title lead
text
and
me
title.
the address. Yeah, I'll get that right out to you guys. Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate that.
No problem.
James Brown Law, we just did this messy transaction where we had a contractor that fired an unlawful lien off just before the closing, literally stalled everything out temporarily. We closed on time. We addressed the issues. We have a whole law firm, boutique real estate law firm that can plow through those issues and get you to the closing table on time. We do hard money loans. We orchestrate hard money loans through a company called TO Capital. And we'll close in crypto. So it's fun to be a part of what's going on in the world of real estate right now, for sure.
It is. Hey, just real quick, I'm glad we could recap. Brian had a thing. He's not sure if we answered Katie's question whether Senate Bill 40 is about the structural repairs. There will still be assessments for updates, repairs, and so on. I guess, Katie, did you have any other questions?
I think I'm okay. I have some questions I'm going to email Jim.
Okay.
And you actually, Jim, just quick. Do you only do, what areas do you do in Florida? Like, do you do like Pensacola area?
Statewide. Yeah. But I just want to recap. So Senate Bill 4D has 2 parts. The first part is milestone reporting. I called it MSR. The second part I called SIRS. That's the Structural Integrity Reserve Study. Like Ryan was saying, they may or may not be the same firm, but the Structural Integrity Reserve Study can no longer be conducted by people who can't be board members sitting around looking for the lowest price roofer anymore. You're going to have to bring some horsepower to the table. If your milestone reporting has a piece that says you got to address these structural elements.
No, now.
Yeah, your Sears report is going to have to be done by a competent group. It's going to have to be done by somebody who specializes in reserve studies.
Yeah. I mean, regardless, they're going to have to go through both this process, the milestone inspection integrity report and the reserve study. And that's how I put them, like, so people don't get confused. There's 2 things, right, that they need to do, and they need to do both of them by the end of 2024. Yeah.
And they take about a year. By the time you start, it's going to take a year to get this thing in front of the board and voted on. So
awesome.
I hope that answers everybody's question. And if you'd be kind enough to text me stuff you'd like to talk about in the future, we cover content that you're not going to hear anyplace else. I know it sounds cliche, but it's going to be stuff like we do contracts. I heard from a couple of agents during the week, hey, I want you to get back and do some more contract stuff because that stuff comes up in real life. And it's not stuff you're going to learn in any contracts review class. I'd be happy to go back to it, but just text me I say iron sharpens iron. You guys text me the topics you want to talk about. we talk about it and guaranteed 100 agents the next day have the same issue and they thank me, oh my God, you guys talked about it on Monday and on Tuesday I felt that pain. All right.
All right. Thanks, guys. This has been a good one. Really enjoyed this. Thank you for the dialogue, and yeah, let's keep the conversation going. Let's help each other out.
Text in those future topics. See you
All
guys.
right.
Yeah, thank y'all.